Hey, Dan, what do you think of when I say Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott, two storied generals, are going to help occupy 500,000 square miles in the United States?
Yeah, it sounds like a land acquisition coming away.
How about one of the conflicts that General Richard Barnes Mason would serve in?
Yep, one of our storied generals from a place called JB.
Jefferson Barracks. So I think that's going to point towards the Mexican-American War.
I can dig that.
This is the Can You Dig It podcast. We crawl into the crypts, gardens, and forgotten cemeteries. Join Dan Fuller, your resident cemetery chronicler, and Joe Shields, the plot-loving development exec, as we unearth the dark secrets of St. Louis and Bellefontaine Cemetery and beyond. From garden geeks to history buffs with a taste for the macabre, as well as fans of iconography, this is your podcast. We love diving deep into the shadows of history. Let's dig in.
So here we are in beautiful Forest Park. Joe, I can't believe we're finishing out season 2. Where did the time go?
Time flies. Tempus fugit is a cemetery term you're going to hear.
Time
for a
flies.
Piece of iconography. Time flies.
And I am here with Joe Shields, our development officer, finishing up what will be our season 2 of the Can You Dig It podcast.
I'm here with Dan Fuller, cemetery chronicler, and it's been a great experience finishing season 2 of the Can You Dig It podcast.
Yeah, and we kind of picked an interesting topic because we haven't really talked about military aspect before. And we know that we're going to be doing some of that in the future. So, we spun the wheel and we decided on the Mexican-American War aspect. And so that's what we're going to dive into in this particular episode, our last episode of season 2.
Dan, I can't think of a better day to talk about this.
And you're trying to say it's not 105 degrees and sweating outside.
Praise hallelujah. And it's not as hot as it was a few months ago.
There we go.
I'm a delicate flower. I almost wilted.
We're going to move into the past and talk about a few aspects of the Mexican-American War and those folks that are laid to rest at Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum.
So the Mexican-American War between the United States and Mexico from April of 1846 to February of 1848. And it all stemmed from the United States annexation of Texas in 1845 and from a dispute over whether Texas ended at the Nueces River, I might be mispronouncing that, or the Rio Grande, which is our claim. Is where the United States claimed.
Correct.
This is a Can You Dig It podcast. Deeper dig.
Can you dig it?
When people think about the American West, they often imagine adventure, opportunity, and lawlessness. But the push westward didn't happen by accident. It was driven, in large part, by a mid-19th century conflict that's often overlooked, the Mexican-American War. In the 1840s, the United States was still a relatively young nation and eager to expand. President James K. Polk was especially determined to acquire new territory. He strongly supported Manifest Destiny, the belief that the United States was destined to expand westward across the North American continent. For many Americans, westward expansion promised opportunity, economic growth, religious influence, land ownership, and the chance for a fresh start. Mexico, however, strongly opposed this expansion. Relations between the two nations were already strained after Mexico lost Texas following its independence in 1836. Polk had his sights set on California and New Mexico and offered Mexico $30 million to purchase the land. Mexico refused, unwilling to give up more territory. Believing expansion was essential to the nation's future, Polk refused to accept Mexico's answer. He ordered U.S. troops into a disputed region along the Texas-Mexico border. When American forces clashed with Mexican cavalry, Polk used the incident to justify declaring war on Mexico on May 13, 1846. Mexico entered the conflict at a serious disadvantage. Internal political instability weakened its government, and its military struggled to match the training and organization of U.S. forces. After 2 years of fighting, Mexico was defeated. The war officially ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, in which Mexico ceded nearly 1/3 of its territory to the United States. This land included areas that are now California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and Texas. The Mexican-American War had lasting consequences. It resulted in one of the largest territorial expansions in U.S. history and permanently reshaped the nation's borders. The war also launched the military careers of several figures who would later play major roles in American history, including future President Zachary Taylor and Civil War leaders Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant.
And so forces will marshal in the United States, and specifically in St. Louis, and we'll talk a little bit about the St. Louis Greys that participated in it, and basically went to Mexico, and without great loss of life would secure those properties that will then become Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, the lower part of California. And we think of that as being so far away, but yet we have so many connections to that at Bellefontaine Cemetery.
And to our listeners, if you're unaware of just how much land that we acquired when we annexed Texas, that's 500,000 square miles.
And as I've said before, you can always tell which one of the two of us is the bean counter.
Without data, I'm lost.
Nah.
And Dan, when you think about 500,000 square miles, that's about a third of the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah, and if you kind of put those two pieces together, that's really like rounding it out over there. And something else that's of someone who is at Bellefontaine Cemetery, our friend Thomas Hart Benton, who kind of coined that whole manifest destiny.
Yes, perfect example of this.
Spreading from ocean to ocean. I think this is where we might have to explain our vocabulary word for the day. I think we've done it in the past, but it's going to be an important one for me to bring up, and that's cenotaph. Cenotaph, by definition, is empty tomb, and I'm bringing it up because just recently we placed a cenotaph for a gentleman named Douglas Irwin, who actually his final place of rest is unknown. It's somewhere in Mexico, and the Veterans Administration gave us permission to erect a cenotaph for Douglas Irwin, who was significant to the Mexican-American War and whose final place of rest is unknown, somewhere in Mexico. They do not know precisely. And so we did erect a stone. If you check out our system, it'll say a memorial in front of it. And it is been placed next to his wife, who happens to be up on a lot that you are very familiar with.
Where's he at in the cemetery?
He's in Bridell.
Okay.
And he is on the same lot with William Beaumont.
Oh.
Because he married Beaumont's daughter.
What a historic area of the cemetery. Dr. William Beaumont, father of gastroenterology. His lot is right up against William Greenleaf Eliot, founder of Washington University. And it's the who's who of the medical community right around him. Dr. Ko-Kwai Chen from
Right.
Eli Lilly.
Right.
I can go on and on.
So he is now memorialized with a cenotaph. And it is kind of an introduction to our Mexican-American War veterans that we do have physically at Bellefontaine Cemetery. And we have story after story of some of those individuals who participated in that action. And what you'll find, and we'll talk about that in Season 3, is that this is a precursor to the Civil War. So many of those individuals who will fight in the Mexican-American War would be opposing one another in the conflict that will come in the future. Now, I want to put this into historic context because, that's my name of the game. So we're talking Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. What happens in 1849?
Well, so there are 11 genius people who found a way to charter a cemetery in North St. Louis.
Yeah.
In May of 1849, the Missouri General Assembly gave us a charter.
And one of those 11 was a guy named
Philander Salisbury,
who was commander of the Missouri troops in the Mexican-American War. So just imagine that. This guy went for 2 years to Mexico, fought in that battle, and when he comes back to St. Louis, the first thing he participates in is creating Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum. He is also the first of the 11 that Joe mentioned who passed and is then buried at Bellefontaine.
So Captain Philander Salisbury was part of St. Louis Legion, 1st Missouri Regiment. And, other regiments that you're going to hear from St. Louisans serving in the Mexican-American War, part of the St. Louis Greys. You're going to hear the Mississippi Infantry, the Laclede Rangers, As I said, St. Louis Legion, 1st Missouri Regiment, the 3rd Missouri Mounted, the Indian Battery, the Kentucky Infantry. It just goes on and on of these brave soldiers who fought for us in the South.
And there is a little bit of an effort right now to identify where these fallen soldiers are and get memorialization. It's kind of one of those things we glossed over in our history, and now we're going back. And as I identified before, Douglas Irwin now has his monumentation, but he's not the first that we were able to secure our marker for at Bellefontaine Cemetery, and I can guarantee you it will not be the last. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back for the second half of what is the last episode of the 2nd season.
I can dig season 2.
Got a dream, a passion, a product, a service, a brand you want the world to know about?
In a world of noise, you need a way to cut through. And today, the most powerful voices aren't the loudest. They're the most specific.
Niche podcasts are exploding, building loyal, engaged communities around every topic imaginable.
Listeners aren't just tuning in.
They're connecting,
trusting,
and buying.
You don't have to be a tech wizard or a radio pro to make it happen. We get it.
Your expertise is your passion, not production. That's where we come in. At Trevian Entertainment Group, we handle the heavy lifting. From recording and editing to getting your show on all the major platforms, we provide a turnkey solution. We're the award-winning producers behind some of the world's most successful niche podcasts.
We'll help you craft a show that sounds polished, professional, and powerful. This isn't just about starting a podcast.
It's about building an authority, creating a community, and turning your dream into a thriving business.
Don't let your voice stay silent. Go to TrevianStudios.com, TREVIAN.com, and start your podcasting journey today.
Ringing blast and fighting times have come at last. Freedom buckle on the sword to crush the Mexican vile horde. Then march, true freemen, march. Come march, true freemen, march. March day and night, then boldly fight for freedom and for Texas. Hey ho, united go to crush the dons of Mexico. Hey ho, united go to crush the dons of Mexico.
So we are back. The Can You Dig It podcast talking about the Mexican-American War. I'm here with Dan Fuller, cemetery chronicler, Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum.
And that was just Joe Shields, our development officer, giving me a little bit of an opportunity to explain a little bit more of what was going on in this time frame. I want you to think about the fact that Missouri became a state in 1821, and one of our first senators was a man named Thomas Hart Benton, who happens to be with us at Bellefontaine Cemetery. And it was the second time that Missouri had attempted statehood, and the whole reason was for the imbalance of slave versus non-slave states. So the Missouri Compromise, part of that was that Missouri came in as a slave state and Maine came in as a free state. And now as we start to move into the 1840s and we have this dispute with Mexico over Texas and we secure Texas, Texas now comes in as a slave state. And now suddenly the scales have been tipped a particular direction. And once we come out of the Mexican-American War, there is a definite slant to the slave states. And we will fight a civil war that will take place beginning in 1861. But before we get there, we are back in the Mexican-American War. And one of the things that I want to bring up is First Lieutenant Lot Henderson Ridgely, who died from mortal wounds at the pass at Guadalajara. And believe it or not, in 1847, when he passed, his body was brought back to St. Louis and laid to rest at First Presbyterian Cemetery. And then when that cemetery became deactive and moved, he was moved to Bellefontaine Cemetery. And up until just 2 short years ago, he was unmarked. But through volunteer efforts at the cemetery, we were able to identify his place of rest, his military history, and he now has an era-appropriate marker at Bellefontaine. And I predict that we're going to find some more because there is a very rich history, as Joe identified in the first half of this, of St. Louisans who participated in this action in Mexico.
So, Dan, you had just mentioned era-appropriate marker, and I'd like you to explain that to our listeners.
Sure. For the VA, the Veterans Administration, they do a marker appropriate for the time that individual passed. So, for example, Henderson Ridgely is going to receive a rounded top, which identifies his Union alliance, and any of the iconography is going to be of that era and that appropriate time. As we move into the Civil War, for example, there will be a difference between secessionists who have a pointed top marker versus the rounded top. And then as we move forward even into today, the iconography will change and evolve. And so iconography that's appropriate for the common era will never be used on an era appropriate. You'll find them sometimes a little bit more, we'll call them stripped down as far as their iconography. But that's part of the duty of us filling out the forms for the VA to identify what era that we're talking about.
You know, I can't imagine the tension that was in and around state capitals and Washington, D.C. as we go through I'd say the beginning of the 1840s, especially the mid-1840s, when we fought this war, because the abolitionists in the country, I'm sure, looked at the annexation of 500,000 square miles and the possibility of other states, just thinking, what are we going to do with slavery? And, you know, when President Polk made his case for war, there was a brand new first-term House member from Illinois who made probably the strongest argument against going to war, and that's Abraham Lincoln.
I'm glad you brought up Illinois.
Because
that allows me to bring up a relatively recent find that I made at the cemetery of somebody buried up in Oddfellows who was a part of the St. Louis Legion, actually a very noted military individual. Now, this is where the research at Bellefontaine, I think, we try to find out exactly. So when I did the initial research on this individual, and I'll give you his name in a moment, it said that he was a graduate of West Point. Nah. He was not. He attended West Point, but he did not graduate. And his name? Alton Rufus Easton.
Really?
And he is the namesake for Alton, Illinois.
I did not know that I knew that he was the namesake. I had no idea of a military background, though.
Yeah, no. He was part of, again, the St. Louis Legion and later a part of the Greys. He became a colonel for the St. Louis Legion during the Mexican War. And so he had, even though he did not graduate from West Point, he attended West Point, but he didn't graduate from. He had quite a stellar career. Interesting little note that came about from one of our wonderful researchers, Julie. She found a letter from Alton's sister to him, basically kind of badgering him about he needs to pay a little bit more attention in class.
You know, speaking of graduations, let's talk about another military institution that's not West Point, that was almost the United States Military Academy for the Army, just south of St. Louis. It's called Jefferson Barracks.
Jefferson Barracks.
It was a major military post during the Mexican-American War, and it was a rest and supply station for most U.S. troops supplied to Mexico, just south of St. Louis.
It's amazing how many people went through JB, went on to the Mexican-American War, but then also doubled back and would fight one another in those upcoming actions that will turn out to be the Civil War. Some of these names, like Don Carlos Buell, Richard Barnes Mason, who did not actually see the Civil War, but did see time in the Mexican-American War. Stephen Watts Kearny, who, again, will fall short of making it through that particular time period, but also went through the gates of Jefferson Barracks. It's a very rich military history that, as you just said, is just south of the city of St. Louis.
And, you know, if you look at the set of circumstances that leads up to the Civil War, from the 1840s all the way through the Mexican-American War and even after it, a lot of the people who played a part in the Civil War, served at JB, went right through JB. President Franklin Pierce was a brigadier general during the Mexican-American War, and he appointed Jefferson Davis as his Secretary of War. At Jefferson Barracks in 1855, Davis organized the 1st and 2nd Regiments of Cavalry, known diversively as Jeff Davis's Pets.
Mm-hmm. And our friend Robert E. Lee was here through this time period and also helped keep the Mississippi River on the St. Louis side. So there's lots of connections there. But we'll go back to the Mexican-American War, and I do want to point out that, you know, we get into it historic aspect of, that's so far away. And William Talcott Hutchinson actually died on board the U.S. frigate Cumberland at the Battle of Veracruz and was brought back to Bellefontaine Cemetery and laid to rest. Now, he, much like what I was telling you about our friend Henderson Ridgely, of course, was buried someplace else before he came to rest at Bellefontaine. And at this particular point, his journey to the cemetery is a little gray. We don't know exactly where he was at that time. And in doing this research, I actually found out that there is a United States military cemetery in Mexico City.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yep, still maintained by the United States today. It's a small patch of land, and everybody within it is a fatality of the Mexican-American War.
So, Dan, through the research efforts, do you know how many known veterans that we have? Roundabouts?
At this particular point, 13, but I know this list is going to grow, and this is going to be some of the efforts that will go. And that's one of the reasons why I hope people will come back and listen to future podcasts, because there is going to be more information that we're going to find. We'll put some effort on this, and we'll rally our researchers together to see what else that we can find. And I bet we'll find some more of those individuals who were transferred from some of those other cemeteries in St. Louis who at this point are unmarked, and we can get them marked in the future. So just to kind of round this out, because we are talking about the Mexican-American War, and I don't think a lot of people realize that when we're talking about that, there is also actions that took place in California. And an individual who is laid to rest with us who died in 1846 is Hiram Ames. And his fatality happened at the Battle of Navidad. He was with a group of military who were basically fighting the Californians, as they were called. And this was an ill-armed group. They didn't have many rifles. They actually used lances for the most part. And unfortunately, our Hiram Ames was lanced on November 16th, 1846, out in California. He laid at rest there for a short period of time, and then after Bellefontaine Cemetery was up and operating, his family would relocate him to the Ames family lot at Bellefontaine. So, the Mexican-American War, it's a little farther stretched than what people realize, as far as from Veracruz all the way up into California.
And another California connection we have is General Richard Barnes Mason. Dan mentioned his name earlier. During the Mexican-American War, he served in the New Mexico Territory and California, rising to the rank of colonel in 1846. And it was after the war he was appointed the 5th military governor of California, serving from 1847 until 1849. And when gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, it was General Mason's report of the finding to President James K. Polk, that official description of the massive gold discovery, that sparked the California gold rush.
And his iconography at the cemetery is a disassembled cannon identifying his death took place outside of his military career. So if you ever come to the cemetery, you'll see this brownstone marker with a row of cannonballs, powder kegs on the corner, and a disassembled cannon laying in basically on top of that carrier, and then there's a slight draping over the top of it. It's one of the more interesting pieces of iconography at the cemetery.
You cannot look out over that section, just your eye immediately goes to it.
Now, this is where we have to, kind of wrap things up with a little bit of levity in the fact that he is buried right next to Don Carlos Buell, who I also mentioned, and both men shared the same wife.
Yes.
But not at the same time.
Not at the same time.
She apparently had a thing for men in uniform. Her first husband was Mason, and then she would later marry Buell.
And both generals are side by side.
Side by side with her in the middle.
Yes.
She doesn't have a marker, though.
No.
Her marker in monumentation is actually on Don Carlos Buell's.
Dan, season 2 has been amazing. We have talked about soiled doves.
Yep. No, and we've had many guests on, too. And that helps kind of round out us, Bellefontaine Cemetery, as a cultural institution and how we interact with these other entities. And all of this is basically foundation on foundation and builds towards the future.
Our listeners have sent just gracious feedback. We've experienced growth, and it's because of listeners like you who help propel this podcast forward. And we would greatly appreciate feedback from you about what you liked, what you thought maybe you wanted to hear, and maybe just any commentary in general. We'd love feedback.
We love the feedback. And again, we hope that you will also take this opportunity to come out to the cemetery and experience the cemetery in first person through one of the programs, whether it be a tour or beer barons or sip souls and strolls, or if you're a runner, you can take place in one of our runs, Foxtrot in the spring, Coyote Crawl in the fall. So there's lots to do, and there's lots for us still to learn. As I always say, what we know is what we know at this particular point, and I can guarantee you that as we move into the next season, we'll have some more information for you.
Season 3 is going to be epic.
We'll have some more guests. We'll go to some other locations, and we'll fill in the gaps.
I can dig it.
I can too.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Also, please share this episode with your family and friends if you got value from the episode as well as the podcast. You can do it right from the platform you are listening on. Plus, take a screenshot and tag us and tag yourself. We are at Podcast Can You Dig It on Instagram. The Can You Dig It podcast is produced by Peace Off Productions and the Trevian Entertainment Group.